Let us welcome Randa Tyre on the stage, who will be moderating this particular session. Please, could you give her a big applause?
Thank you very much. Well, by now we're friends already, so I would like to welcome my panelists, my esteemed panelists, and hopefully you will have the best panel discussion. So if you can help me in welcoming my first, Shane Shin, Forbes Middle East 30 Under 30 co-founding manager, partner at Shuruq Investment, a leading early stage tech-focused VC. Hello, Shane. Yalman Khan. Yalman is a founder of Naqiya Ventures, focusing on growth markets, social impact, venture capitalist investment. Thank you. Welcome. Yunus Yakhsha, founding partner of Bright Circle, which focuses on business strategists and investment, and is a serial entrepreneur. Welcome, Yunus. Chris Thomas, angel investor, co-founder and CEO of Eureka, the first and largest global equity crowdfunding platform. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
Tariq Ahmed Fouad, programs manager at Shira, an early stage investor, startup coach, and mentor. Welcome.
Thank you. You gonna stand? Hello.
I will entertain standing up until we figure this out, but I think we have a really interesting panel here because not only some of them do come from a VC mindset or background, but some are not necessarily VC, but they do know where the money comes from. So the idea is for you to understand how things work from behind the scenes. Welcome everyone, thank you. Welcome everyone, and I'll start with a very simple thing, right? And I will ask, maybe I can ask Shane to start with. What is a typical day like for VC ventures, right? So I know most people will think that you're only focused on, who to give money to and how to give it, but that's just a fraction of what you do. So give us an insight, please.
So hello everyone. My name is Shane Shin, and I run Shuruq Investments, early stage of VC here in the Middle East. So I would actually bucket my time in two big ways. First is portfolio management. So I think every VC has a different style, but we do spend a lot of time managing our portfolio companies. So we have 16 on our portfolio companies. And because we're very, our investment principle as a founders partners, we spend a lot of time working with them, be that hiring. Sometimes I'm on a call to even interview like a CMO for a portfolio company, or just to fix XYZ issue. So there's a lot of things going on every single day. So we spend a lot of time on that. Meeting new companies is definitely a big part of our job. So we see about 10 companies a week, all from the Middle East. So we're very active. Normally they're all referrals, so I cannot just say yes or no from the email. So I actually really spend time to meet them on a phone call, at least meet in person. So we spend a lot of time with that. And the initial meeting is only initial meeting. We spend a lot of time digging into their data, digging into the, let's say, we care a lot about historical actuals. So if they send me the historical actual, we spend a lot of time looking at that, customer calls, talk to also other VCs who actually invested in them just to get their thoughts on the founders and just to get their thoughts on how the company is performing. So just definitely making a check is really the last part. I think that's the easiest part. Yeah. There's a lot of heavy due diligence part that goes before that.
Would you consider that your best day or your worst day?
So if we make the decision, that's definitely the best day, but that only comes, so we only invest 1 to 2 companies a quarter. So we don't do a lot of investments. We make about 6 to 7 concentrated investments per year, which is, in our view, still pretty low in the VC. So unfortunately, the best day doesn't come often, but we do enjoy meeting people. So every dinner, every interaction with the founder is always a fun part of our job.
So speaking of decisions, if I want to ask, what is your investment thesis? How do you make decisions when it comes to investment?
So for us, we focus on the early stage, so seed to Series A. So that can really mean a lot also in different regions. But for us, we have our own definition, and we believe that we can really serve that early stage funding gap. We still believe that there's a lot of startups, a lot of entrepreneurs coming up that space, but we still lack a lot of institutional VCs, so sophisticated investors, filling that gap of working with the founders, working with the entrepreneurs to start building the company to make it scalable, to make it in multiple different countries, just to even with the strategy and the valuation and all, etc. So we focus on early stage, we focus on MENAT as the region, we focus on tech. Within tech, we have 4 key themes of fintech, platform businesses, software, and lastly, we do love tech-enabled business services. So a lot of those are traditional businesses that are being impacted by tech. We love that.
That's brilliant. I want to compare it to your way of investing, Galman. So you also come from a VC background, and what's your investment thesis?
We work for our investors, the people who invest with us historically over the last 30 years. And we focus not on any geography or any stage. So we're very financially based investors, and they're all looking for a specific quick return. So we've historically exited our investments in about 3 to 4 years. So there's a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of work. We really back the actual... Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now? That's a lot better. Okay, so we work for and spot the right entrepreneurs. So over the last 3 decades, when we found an entrepreneur who we know, even if he or she does not get the money from a VC, will still succeed. They've got that mad passion in their eyes. We tend to back that type of driven entrepreneur. And we're actually backing that entrepreneur. And so we look for their attitude, their ambition, and their aptitude. We've got a very simple model, the 3 A's.
3 A's, brilliant. So yeah, that's a very interesting way to look at. And maybe Yunus, you can share how do you look at certain investment coming from business strategy sense?
So for us, the most important when we work with investors such as VCs or family offices in the GCC region or in Europe, most precisely in Switzerland, the first thing that we look at when we perform due diligence is the team. So as we know, 65% of the startup fail because of the team. So we start with that. And if you look at the most successful startup, they pivoted many times, 2 or 3 times. So we want to make sure that we have the right team that can execute the idea, because an idea is just an idea at the end of the day. And so when we advise, let's say, some VCs, but more family offices in their investment, we need to make sure that we have the right people that are going to receive the check. So this is our approach. We don't have any specific sector of investment, because when you work with different and multiple investors, some of them, they want healthcare, pharma, some of them tech, some of them more traditional or conventional businesses. So the most important thing for us is to have an entrepreneur that can execute it, hard worker, and I would say that doesn't search for directly to contact VCs and try to get some shortcut to avoid rolling up their sleeves and just getting the money and trying to do this. So we want traction, we want to see revenue, we want to see customer, and then we decide to go ahead or not.
So you focus a lot on skill set, regardless of the industry. Is the team, is the people that work and how they reach there?
Yes, absolutely. And plus, as a business strategist, we're going to look a lot of the homework done prior to starting the businesses, like industrial analysis, competitor analysis, and the barriers to entry. We know now in the US that there is a patent war. So if you want to scale, especially if you start from Dubai, there is no point to start something if you know that you won't be able to scale and penetrate, for example, the European market or the US market. So entrepreneur now would say that they need to be more sophisticated and to do some research, because you might end up with a nice product. You have been working hard for 1 year, 1.5 years, and then you cannot tap into a new market. So it doesn't make sense.
Brilliant. So Tariq, you also work with sophisticated entrepreneurs. What is how do you choose? What's your investment thesis?
So just a little bit about Shira. We are an incubator and accelerator that is government-backed, and probably we come at an earlier stage to the VCs, where we work with idea stage, pre-seed and seed stage companies, get them to be ready to actually raise their first round of fund from a VC. Nevertheless, the amount of emphasis, if VCs emphasize people at seed stage, you can think of how much this needs to be emphasized at idea stage. So people is definitely the first thing that we look at. There are psychological tests that they actually go through. We also experiment them in terms of leadership traits. So we put them in controlled groups and we see how they can work within a team. We assess them on around 15 to 20 leadership traits at an early stage. And obviously we'll look at their business model, retweak it if need be, get them to test it out in the market. There are certain milestones and tasks that they've got to reach and for them to kind of take it from there onwards. So a typical day at Shira is purely work with entrepreneurs, right from idea down to them executing it, launching the product or the service in the market, getting the first 100 customers or so, and then raising their next round of fund and so on. But definitely it's a very similar investment thesis as most VCs, but the majority of our time is working with the startups.
And you have a very rigorous process for them to go through.
100%.
That's
Yes.
yeah, just a different way to look at it. And I know, Chris, you have a different way to look at funding in general. So what is your way of looking at investment?
So we are can you hear me? Is this on? No. This one's not working either. All right. Cheers. Hello? Yeah. So I run an equity crowdfunding platform based here in Dubai, but also operating in other markets globally in Southeast Asia and Europe. And ultimately what we do as a platform is help entrepreneurs raise cash. They might raise that money from VCs of other platform, but also, and the majority of the money is raised through angel investors. So individuals like you or me that's looking to invest in relatively early stage businesses. We have, as you can imagine, many applications from entrepreneurs looking to raise money, and we list around 1% of the businesses that apply to us. So our funnel, in terms of what we list on the platform, is also very severe. And for us, the key determinant, so to go back a step, so our sweet spot from a funding perspective are businesses that are raising between around $250,000 to $2 million. Post-operational, post-revenue, so we don't raise money for ideas or super early stage stuff, and preferably for our second or third round of funding, really just so the entrepreneur understands how challenging fundraising is, rather than think they're going to come on a platform and money's going to fall from the sky. But so we take those businesses through many filtration steps to see if we're going to list them, but the main determinant is again the team and the entrepreneur. But from the other side, we look at the fundability of the business rather than necessarily the likelihood of success of the business. And the fundability of the business really at that early stage is qualitative. It's not quantitative. It's not really based on data. Every business you see, you're going to get a model that's going to show hockey stick growth. Everyone's going to get bought by Google for $1 billion in 5 years' time. What we're looking at is, does that entrepreneur, does he or her have the energy to face the battle that is about to commence when raising money? It is a hustle, right? It's a game, and not always the most, just like dating, not only always the most beautiful businesses get funded, it's the ones that can play the game properly, and maybe we'll talk more about that game later on in this half an hour.
Yeah, let's talk about this game. So what are the common mistakes that you see entrepreneurs do when they are preparing for this funding?
How long you got? They're not prepared to raise funding.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the most common mistake is businesses are not prepared and they're not ready to start a funding round. And that has many subsets. They might be trying to raise money too late, as in that they've already run out of cash by the time they start knocking our doors. They need to understand that in order to raise money, whether you're going to a VC or raising money through angels, it's a journey you're going to go through, right? You have to build momentum. It's a campaign you're putting out there, and you have to start a lot earlier as entrepreneurs than you think you do. In fact, you should always be. So I'm an entrepreneur. I'm as one of the founders of Eureka. My job is to raise money for Eureka, and we've raised $7 to $10 million for Eureka itself. And so my job is less now supporting and dealing with the entrepreneurs on our platform, but it is really raising cash. And that's a constant theme, whether we have a round open or whether we're in between rounds, we're constantly trying to prepare ourselves for that next round of funding. So it's a lack of preparation. Preparation comes through having the right data points in place, showing growth. You should be raising money when you're doing this, whatever that is, whether that is revenue or whether that is sales or whether it's acquisition or whatever metrics you can put in place as an entrepreneur to show that you have proof points that you are now, if you like, growing and building momentum. That is what investors are going to invest in. They are, by definition, investors are greedy and they're also fearful. So they're going to be fearful of missing out on something that is moving away from them. So something is growing and is now moving in a direction, they want to grab it, and they're greedy and they want to invest in businesses that they're going to make money from, and that is human nature, and it's very difficult to get that game right for an entrepreneur if you're not well prepared.
It is. You can never be ready. What other mistakes have you faced? I mean, I can open it for Shane. Go ahead.
I think Chris really made a great point, overall very comprehensive. I just want to highlight one specific point on the timeline. Here in the region, which is still maturing, both entrepreneurs and investors and everyone, on average, it takes about 9 months to raise any capital, be that a seed round or anything. And if you think about that, that's crazy because frankly, in the US, if it takes 3 months, it's already pretty slow. And here in 9 months, it can actually mean a startup can die. So today, if you think about raising capital for 9 months when you're so busy running a business, that's really a big risk. So all of us, we are trying to solve how can we make it faster. But I think really if you really don't have enough cash to survive for 6 months and beyond, it really puts into trouble. And I'll put into a perspective for a VC. If a startup comes to me and say, I'm raising capital, and I ask him, what's your burn rate, how much cash, and he said, well, I'm burning cash in 3 months, then that really puts us into a big trouble because we know that other investors are also conservative here, tend to compare to the US. And if the startup is telling me, unless you fund me now, I'm gonna die, then it's another factor for us to consider. Like even if I put, like you might go for another few months, but if the other investors don't come in, you're essentially telling me, as soon as I make an investment, you're gonna die in a few months. No VCs wanna be in their shoes. So this it really becomes a chicken and egg. Other VCs also think, oh, like, even if I come in, other VCs don't come in, then you're gonna die again in the next few months. So I don't think it's fair for an entrepreneur to put investors into their shoes. So unfortunately, please do really focus on your cash flow. If you're raising capital, it takes time. Like it will take time. And I think it's important to highlight that.
Any other problems that entrepreneurs miss, like problems that they don't pay attention when they're preparing for funding?
Our experience has been that if we like an entrepreneur and a business idea, or if we formulate that, we take that entrepreneur on a journey. And again, you've talked about the 3 A's. We have these simple cheat sheets for entrepreneurs, especially first-time entrepreneurs, and we call it the 4 M's. If they can sit down with us and figure out what those 4 M's are, and I'll cover that in a second, that they tend to have a better chance of success. We have a better chance of success. Our investors have a better chance of getting good returns. And the 4 M's, essentially, it's Business 101 at MBA school. So you look at your management, the money, the business model, the market opportunity, and the magic. If we can get those 4 M's aligned, we know that in a nascent market like the Middle East, investors tend to be a lot more risk averse compared to the West Coast. And what happens is, if we can get the entrepreneur to sit down and figure out what those 4 M's are, they've got a good story to tell us and investors. And investors typically, in 3 decades, I've seen, will invest exactly what Chris and Sharuk just said, that basically it's fear and greed. If we can convince if they can convince us that the fear of missing out on this investment and the greed of what the returns are going to be like, and they've got the 4 M's sorted out, and we've got the 3 A's sorted out, we will have a better chance of success. And that structured approach works well. The only thing I would say, and this is going to be unpopular in a nascent industry like this, in growth markets, you'll see typically either private equity or investment banking professionals who get into venture capital. A lot of Asia, a lot of our clients in China, Hong Kong, they are ex-investment bankers. In my personal opinion, the best venture capitalists are people who run businesses themselves or have come from the advisory operational end of a McKinsey or a PricewaterhouseCoopers. And they've seen a lot of businesses, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and they can help guide that entrepreneur of where those holes are. And I think those are the kinds of things new nascent regions have got to start looking at a lot more. And that includes portfolio management, the actual essence of going in and fixing the problems. I won't mention names. We met somebody, some local VCs who were willing, when there was problems in an investment, to change the CEO, change everything, because you would never do that anywhere else in the world. The VCs, they've backed that entrepreneur, but for a reason. You can't go in month 9 and go, well, actually, we were not sure about you, but we love the idea. Figure out how you're going to fix that person's problem, and that's more hand-holding. Typically, finance guys don't know how to do that.
I just want to add on this, because we see entrepreneurs left, right, and center. We've just graduated around 75 startups ourselves in the past 2+ years. And a lot of entrepreneurs assume that everybody should invest in their startup, that all VCs are VCs and they follow the same rules, they invest in the same sectors, and therefore they go with a spray and pray type of model, which is not correct at all. It's away from the truth. All venture capital firms have a thesis, have sectors that they like to invest in or understand better. And at the end, it's imagine you knocking on the doors of a person that you don't know in the first place and ask them for $500,000 or $1 million. Why would they give you the money in the first place? The investment is beyond just the money, and entrepreneurs need to understand it's a relationship, and it's actually a long-term partnership, one that looks very close to marriage, but without the divorce. And if you started understanding this, you'd be very picky with who would come on board, and they would be the same. In fact, they're taking as much risk as you are in the business. And therefore, it takes a lot of time. It takes months. And if you're not going to invest in building a relationship with that investor in the first place, and you've done your homework in terms of, is it the right VC? Do I need VC in the first place? Most startups think that the only way to raise capital is VC. You've got the likes of Eureka as a platform to actually grow and crowdfund in the first place, right? You've got angel networks. So choose the right way of funding at the right stage. And only then probably the chances of success will be a lot much better in raising capital.
So I'll be short. And the first thing at the really beginning, if it's your first round, if you don't have any warm introduction, it's going to be difficult to access them. Because these guys, to work for a VC, it's a very tough job. You have a lot of things to do. You have a lot of pressure from the LPs. They also need to show performance. So they receive, I believe, between 5 to 10 pitch deck per day. So if you are not smart enough or not able to access someone from their circle and ask for warm introduction, it will not happen. And the second thing is, I don't know, but according to some studies and some feedback that we received from them, they spend average 20 seconds per executive summary per pitch deck. So it needs to be clear. You need to be able to highlight what is your project, what is your startup about, and if it's not clear, you're going to miss the opportunity. The last thing that I'd like to say, never hide anything, because as I mentioned, it's people investing in people. You can have the best idea if you are not able to execute it, it's just an idea. So if you start hiding something from day one, and then it comes, because of course they are smart guys, when they're gonna start doing the due diligence, they will look at everything. So if it comes at the end, and you've hidden something, it's really bad, and you're gonna waste for them like 2 or 3 months of work for yourself. Then you get blacklisted. So it's really important to be transparent and to see VCs as support. They are not just only investors. They're gonna guide you. They're gonna support you. They're gonna help you to negotiate your term sheet, to, like Shorouk does, to call it the investment, to find you other investment. So it's really like, as Tariq mentioned, like a marriage. So never hide anything, and they know that if you're a first time or second time entrepreneur, that you have the right to make mistake. And yes, that's basically what I wanted to add on this.
And I think that's very important, because sometimes the things that they hide is not really a big deal to them, or they see it's not really important, but it is important, right? It's a big part of the whole, of the whole pitch, if you want to say. So that is very important. Now, you found a number of mistakes because you've seen so many different entrepreneurs, right? How do you help decrease the stress that those entrepreneurs go through, because they need to change a lot of things based on the investor that they're going after, whatever type of investment. They have to fit into their matrix. They have to figure out more things. There's a lot of unknown territories and a lot of changes. So what do you think they should do to themselves, because you can't help them directly, to de-stress, to take it one at a time? Like, how do you, maybe examples of things like that could help? It's open for whoever has an answer for our stress.
I'm happy to take the first cut. So I don't actually think the startups should change artificially and intentionally so much just to be investable by the VCs. Like, I mean, there are a few things that they need to make it change. For example, like structure. We see a lot of times the structure is an issue here in the Middle East. Frankly, it's a lot more simplified in the US where I come from. So structuring some simple things, some basic things, they do need to change. But just to position your story or like a fake it to get the capital, it will not end up in a nice way. But I think to respond to your question about de-stressing, I actually think the best way to do that is actually to talk to a lot of entrepreneurs. That's why I personally believe there is some value of going through like a Shara or going through some of these accelerators, and because you realize the problem you face, other guys face it. Even Shorouk, we are also a startup. It just happened to be that our startup, our business model is to invest in other startups. And I face the same scalability issue. I face the same, let's say, the talent issue, and etc. So you're definitely not alone. And if you face the same issue, others are feeling the same. So that's one. And really, we talked about transparency. That is so important, especially to be proactive, because people will figure it out. And once you lost that trust, and VCs here, the investors here are very small, which is pro and con. So once we find out, we always hang out with each other with Shisha. So when we talk about companies all the time. So when I tell, oh, this company, I found that XYZ, it is very tough. So the regional ecosystem is still very small, and especially the investor community is very tight, very small, which I think sometimes pro and sometimes negative for the people.
Definitely. We at Shara, the Series A program, actually part of the programs focuses on mental health. because founders end up being sucked into the entrepreneurial ecosystem and lifestyle, and forget that for a moment they've got things that are more important than just the business. They've got families, they've got friends, they've got financial dreams, they've got faith, and if at any moment all these pieces fade away and what's left is just the business, and even if you ended up being successful by being focused at the business, most probably you have failed at other aspects of life. And by bringing this up to their attention and by deliberately making them plan for all these aspects and making time for all these aspects as well, chances are that they would appreciate a lot more what's going on around their lives, and they would feel more whole. And should at any point in time, which is just the nature of business, things do not necessarily work well for them, there are other parts in their lives that they're doing really well with that could balance off how things go in the business. So certainly that's one way. The other way is we bring them together. Networking with like-minded entrepreneurs, just like Shane said, is definitely a way to kind of voice and to communicate and to get help around your circle. Think of it as a support group, but instead of I'm an alcoholic, I'm an entrepreneur type of group. And that's really what you need. You need people around you who are passionate and believe in your dream, and are there to support you. But you also, as an entrepreneur, need to invest time into the other aspects of your life. So then, when things go wrong, well, there are other elements to help you up with.
And from those that, especially if you've worked in the Middle East and outside the Middle East, would you say the same problems are faced in terms of entrepreneurs? Like, how do they face this looking for funding? And also, so share with us the differences that you notice, like clear difference between their journey here and there, from both sides, from the entrepreneur side and the funding side.
So, for us, we are involved in both region, but I would say that in Europe, or I'm a bit familiar with the US because we have two startups there, but most precisely in Europe, I would say that people and entrepreneurs have less pressure because you have less cost involved. Let's say if you want to set up your own, license, you just pay one-off. You pay the notary guys that's gonna prepare the documents, and that's it. You can work from your garage, from your house. You have, I would say, less regulation. You don't need to renew your license every year. You don't need to pay for visas. You don't need to pay. Let's say if you want to have like more experienced entrepreneur who maybe have 35, 40 years, like we had the great example with Karim. These two ex-McKinsey bringing a lot of experience. Even if it's a copycat, it's something that it's very difficult to copy and to implement. And basically, they created a problem for Uber now in the market. So for me, this is the problem that I would see for entrepreneur. That when you are here, you need to pay the school for your kids. You need to pay high fees for insurance. You need to pay. If you want to be in other free zone, I'm not talking about ADGM because they have a cheap license, but the other free zone, Martin. So you pay maybe 15 or 20,000, or even 40,000. So okay, you don't have taxes, but you pay a lot of upfront fee. And as an entrepreneur, for the first 3, 4, 5 years, maybe 6 years, you will not generate profit. So based in this country, you will not pay tax anyway. So I believe that they have less financial pressure, but at the same time, Dubai, if you use it properly as a hub and as a lab, you can achieve much more than being in Europe. So that's the good thing. And even myself, before setting up my own businesses, I used to be working in private banking, you know. So the people that I've met here in Dubai within these 5 years, it would have taken me maybe 30, 40 years back in Europe to reach out to these people. So there are both the two sides, but I believe in terms of pressure, you have much more pressure here in the region.
So I actually just want to quickly chime in. I actually think, and this is just my expat view from who has a lot of love and passion for the Middle East. I actually think sometimes we have this notion that Silicon Valley or the US or Europe, they have everything that we don't have. And I can tell you with complete confidence that I worked in Wall Street, I worked in Silicon Valley. They actually have the same issues. So like here, most common things that entrepreneurs, especially the C-level entrepreneurs, always say we don't have engineering talent. Yes, it is true in terms of number that we don't have a lot of, let's say, amazing engineers like the way we find in Palo Alto or Sand Hill Road. It is true. However, if you go there, the founders also always be complaining about, oh, I don't have an engineer, for example, because they actually cost $250,000 to actually pay for 1 year's salary. So like the same talent issue, it's just different way to complain. It's just different way to think about it. But like the entrepreneurs there face the same issue. VCs here in the US, we still face the same issue. Yes, we are emerging market, so we don't have, let's say like 1,000 funds who focus on Series A, another 500 funds who focus on Series B. We don't have that, but it's okay because we are growing. I'm just sometimes worried that we're always thinking about how can we compare to the US, and honestly, like a grass always looks greener. If I'm in the US, we were actually thinking about the same thing. It was so expensive there. San Francisco, 2-bedroom is about $5,000 per month. Okay, so it's ridiculously expensive. You need to raise $5 million to actually survive and just build a team. Here, you can survive with $700,000, $600,000 as a seed. So there's a lot of we just always be complaining about what we don't have, but there's a lot of benefits, opportunities that come with it, right? I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you, and certainly what Eunice said in terms of, I mean, on the one hand, it is somewhat challenging to get a business off the ground here because you cannot test and iterate quickly. You know, and if I'm in the UK, I can get loads of interns in, I can employ someone for a couple of months, see what happens. It's a much, you know, the lead in time and the cost in terms of visas, etc. here make that more difficult. But on the flip side, this is a great place to raise money. The point of this panel is, I'm assuming it is fundraising, right? It is much easier to raise cash here in Dubai and in the GCC than it is in Europe or the States, as far as I'm concerned. And that's me talking as a funding platform, but also as an entrepreneur that has raised money in all these markets. You know, there is so much more disposable capital here. There's much less competition for that dollar, so you can create a business and very quickly differentiate yourself and put yourself in a position to raise that funds from individuals here. And the VC industry and the funding industry is very, very approachable. It's easy. You know, you can meet these guys. It's a good network here, and for that reason, it's a great place to raise money.
That's brilliant. And yes, a reminder for us that we are in good place and we can stop comparing to the outside and start focusing on what we have. I love this. I want to ask one industry level question before we close off. So there is a massive entry of new money coming in, so family offices, different types of funding. And how do you see this affect the industry of being funded and the valuation of the startups? Because some people confuse different types of funding with VCs. They think they're all VCs. So how do you see it at an industry level affecting the startup, the valuation, I mean?
I'm probably least experienced about the Middle East than some of the gentlemen on this panel, but in the last decade or so, we've seen a huge increase of interest from family offices, corporations, institutions who've come and co-invested alongside our deals in Asia and Europe and the US. I can see the sea change. And as you said, all right, it doesn't have to be the VC money. There's so many more sources of funding, so many different structures of funding, so many different types of ways to get yourself off the ground. I believe that you don't need VC funding in all cases. I'm putting myself out of a job. It's not always the best case. There's some horror stories in Europe, in Australia, where VCs have screwed up entrepreneurs, and I'm sure it's the other way around as well. I think the challenge for me, even in the last 10 years or so in the region, has been family groups, institutions, people with, again, because all their chief investment officers, all their people tend to be more from a banking background, therefore programmed to be risk averse. So they'll follow something because somebody else is doing it, and coming back maybe challenging you two on the other end. I don't see a lot of great, unique ideas funded locally. They'll get the money here, they'll get co-investments here, but they won't get things in healthcare or certain new business models that have worked other places. They go, love it, but let it be proven somewhere else. That's my personal experience. I think that's going to change as well as this region becomes less nascent.
No, I agree with you. There's not many unique businesses here, but if you have a Me Too business, you can still raise cash here, is really my point. To your question, in terms of what has been the impact, industry level and value, and in terms of valuations for all this new cash coming in, it is certainly, as an entrepreneur and as a platform funding entrepreneurs, it's a positive thing for entrepreneurs, right? Because the more choices you have in terms of raising cash, the more chance you have of raising the money. And as we tell all entrepreneurs, money is a commodity, right? It is everywhere. There is only one of you. You are the prize. And the more, certainly 20 years ago, when really it was only venture capital that you could raise cash from, that meant that there was a real imbalance between the, if you like, the power dynamics between entrepreneur and investor. But that has somewhat softened as more funding opportunities have arisen. And I think it's caused VCs to have to innovate and change their model, change the way that they service the entrepreneurs they're raising money from, both from in terms of how quickly they're able to make a decision, all the way through to using accelerators and otherwise how they can really add value to the entrepreneurs rather than just be a check that is signed and potentially a network on the other end. So I think it's a positive thing. I think it is causing valuations to go up, and that is not a positive thing for really anyone, not even the entrepreneur, but they don't realize that yet. But they will in later funding rounds. But yeah, more competition is always healthy.
Just wanted to highlight one thing because Chris just mentioned the point I wanted to mention. It's completely fine and encouraged to receive capital from anyone you feel comfortable and you can feel like a partner. But do be mindful that you will probably need a series of funding. And then the future investors, if you ever want to tap into the VCs, one of the very first things we look for is a cap table. And it is important if you raise, let's say, like when I first came to the region, a lot of startups always tell me the valuation is 15 million. I actually thought there was almost like a collusion going on at 15 million. Literally, it doesn't matter which business, where you stand, they always gave me, I'm 15 million. And because frankly, the thing is, we do have some disposable income, and some angel investors actually sign up to that. They sign up and they tell me, I'm valued at 15 million, are you in or not? And pretty much most VCs, especially at the seed stage, they'll probably say no. Then I wish you the best of the best luck, because unless you have a down round, unless you already thought through that, it's really in a tough situation. So if you receive capital, it's fine. Just think through that you'll probably need support from others down the road, and you just need to position well.
For me, I believe that it's a very great opportunity for all the actors, for VCs, for us, startups, entrepreneurs. So as I mentioned, the last 3 weeks I was in Geneva, and we came up with this idea a couple of months ago, since we saw that many family offices or other private banks, they want to tap into this asset class. So basically we developed like a workshop for them, because what we identified that even though they have their own investment director that know a lot about stocks or bonds or traditional investment vehicle, they have a lack of knowledge into startups. So I believe that the VC will still play a big role, because these guys, they are the experts They sleep day and out, startup in mind, they know the trait and characteristic of entrepreneur, they know what works, they do a lot of research. So I don't believe that for now that we can see it as a threat for the VC, because they might be more agile and more flexible in terms of investment, but I see that it's a good complement. They can collaborate and increase the cash flow. If you look at it, I think now 40% of investment are into private companies, because if you look at the stock markets, they don't pay anymore. So 40% is huge. So there is a lot of cash liquidity available for these new startups. And even almost a year ago, we raised 800,000 Swiss franc, which is 800,000 US dollar, for a pre-seed fintech startup. And it was from a private bank. So if they have the knowledge in-house and they know about fintech, this kind of thing, the ticket size might increase quickly. But I believe that VCs will still say, because they are the expert. They only invest in startup in this asset class, not anything else. So
Nice, perfect. Well, I do have one more question, but if I see 3 hands up, I will give you the time to ask instead of me. 1, 2, 3, okay, you got it. So can we have a few more minutes to answer some of the questions? So we have here in this area, all 3 of them actually.
Hi, just a quick question for Shane. You said you invest in the early stage. How early? Do they have to be revenue generating?
So, of course, I think any VC investor will say we prefer it, or they say yes. So I'll give you an example. So we have a company like a Pure Harvest, where we had a thesis on a food security. So Pure Harvest is a fancy word, it's a smart greenhouse gas technology company. We had a thesis, we were looking for good companies. Frankly, we couldn't find one. So we actually even founded one. We bought the agricultural land, we incorporated the company, we hired the team out of, frankly, Stanford, and we raised $6 million, which is the largest seed raise in the history of a GCC. So we co-founded, led the pre-seed round, led the seed round. So it really depends on the thesis and the team. Like some companies, I will tell you, you're way too early. For example, if you're an e-commerce company, and if I've seen like 100 times, I'll probably tell you it's a bit too early, because you have to show me traction to at least convince me that you're quite different. Because every single company tells me it's different, right? So it really depends on you, the fit, how much I know the founder, if I've seen you like around, and our relationship, the business model, the sector, the competitive dynamic. And we do believe that we're good. We do believe that we have our own, let's say investment principle. So it depends on that.
Next question here.
Hi, my name is Samar Limmer. I'm the founder of Deliver to Mom, which is an e-commerce platform for baby products anywhere in the UAE. I have 2 questions. Number 1, and it's for the whole panel. Number 1, what are the disadvantages of a low valuation, or if there's any? So that's the first one. The second one is, in the space here, I think we're missing, and this is a general one, and I want to know your thoughts on it. I think we're missing angel investments. So people think of investments as VCs right away. The angels is missing out entirely over here, or it's informal. It's not formalized, let me say it that way. Where would people go for that? Where they're too early for seed investment, but more looking at pre-seed to get a valuation? Thoughts?
So I'll answer a few. I'm not sure if the second one was a question, but certainly angel groups do exist, more predominantly around Dubai area. I know in Sharjah we're building one. But certainly you would want to tap into angels and super angels early on. Going to pre-seed to Shane or maybe to Yaman wouldn't make any sense to them and wouldn't make any sense to any institutional investor. But certainly there are other ways to kind of look at it. Maybe those angels are not necessarily in a network. So you want to tap into those who you think can add value to your company. Maybe if you need help in logistics, find somebody who's a senior VP in logistics, for example, in a company. Maybe he would add not just value, but probably invest in your company. The other way is to maybe look at companies that are like you, go into Crunchbase or any other platform where they're listed and see who has invested in them. And probably those investors, and some of them are actually angels, probably are the ones that you want to tap into and reach out to them. In terms of a low evaluation, I think it goes back to the purpose of why you've started the business. I think if you started the business because that's something you're passionate about, something that you want to do, and something that you want to have some sort of legacy left for generations to come, I think valuation in general wouldn't mean anything. But if it's something down the route of you want to exit in 5 or 7 years and there is a specific number that you want to exit at, then I think re-engineer that and see if that number is low or high. But I really don't see there is a disadvantage there.
We've got a track record of investing in pre-seed companies. I don't mean many people. So we actually look at, when I mentioned the 4 M's, if we like the entrepreneur and we believe that their business model is going to be a success, we're not a bunch of investment bankers, so we've operated businesses. That was why I was telling what our thesis is. If we feel the greed and the fear of losing out, we have successfully invested in pre-revenue companies. 2 of our current deals, one, we have an entrepreneur sitting here, one of our best companies in Dubai.
Say hello to Shamim.
Shamim, hi, Playdate. They are pre-revenue, we love it, they're going to be huge globally. The other company's in New Zealand. We raised $800,000 last year, we're raising $10 million this year, investing in the company, still pre-revenue, because that's a huge upside in medical device technology. So exactly as you said, Shane, just like you've done with Pure Harvest, we've also done agri-tech in Japan. When the 4 M's line up, we don't care about revenue.
Nice.
And the final piece, you've talked about valuations. Why valuations are important to be on the optimum. Obviously, the investors want to get the lowest valuation, entrepreneurs want to get the highest valuation, but there's a fine spot, as Chris and Shane mentioned. You don't want to get a down round. And you know that every 6 to 18 months you're going to be having a next round of funding in. You don't want the existing investors in your company to feel, oh, shoot, that was a really down round. So psychologically, our company's valued less. So if you manage the next 6 rounds of funding over the next 2 years or 3 years, you've got to figure out some sort of J-curve of success in your business before you get to an exit. So that's why the valuation cannot be too high up front, because the entrepreneur will go, wow, my company's valued at $50 million, as you said. Well, guess what? It can't be 60 million in the next 3 months. So that's why the valuation is important.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious disadvantage of a low valuation is that you're having to yield more equity, you have to give away more equity and dilute yourself relative to the amount of money you're bringing in. But certainly with very early stage businesses, don't worry too much about that, right? I mean, you let those investors that are coming at that stage, let them benefit, let them enjoy that upside as they grow with you, right? That's more than just goodwill. They're going to introduce more investors to you. There is an impact to that that's positive going through the stages and the funding rounds that you go through. From an angel investment perspective, there's many angel investors here in the region. Platforms like Eureka are trying to concentrate them, and if you like, commoditize them within a platform. So we're a platform that links entrepreneurs with angels, but also you will have, and one of the genesis of crowdfunding is really enabling an entrepreneur to firstly tap into the network of individuals that already have an emotional connection with their business. They might be your customers, your suppliers, your followers, the people you went to business school with, whoever it might well be. And platforms like our job is to help you convert that emotional interest into a financial interest. I get them to invest. So there is there are many angel networks here. There are many individuals that do invest regularly and create a portfolio of early stage businesses as individuals, but also you will already have in your network a lot of individuals that you can convert into investors just with the right tools and the right charm.
And the right cap table.
All right, so I'm inviting anyone else who has. I hope we answered the third question. I hope we answered most of your questions because we need to leave. But I really want to thank you all for being here. Chris, Shane, Yunus, Yalman, and Tariq, you've been amazing. Thank you very much, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
So,